Now moving on to the second strip. Now this is how initially the sketch for the fifth strip looked like. I did the same procedure for the fifth panel, the same as I did for the first panel. I took my reference image and I traced it. You may notice that I've placed Charlie for reference and that he's looking up at the caretaker as he's putting in the soup. I did the exact same procedure for caretaker. Since there is not that much of perspective, although there is perspective, I agree with that, but it was not to such extreme that I needed all of the vanishing points. Essentially, I could have worked without them. So all I needed was for this vertical axis for the caretaker. So I had these two support lines for me to understand that this is how he's supposed to look like in this vertical space. If I really thought about how would Charlie look up into this specific perspective of in the original reference photo. Charlie is not actually on the ground. In fact, he's actually raised from the ground. He's actually hovering in the air. So in a way, this panel is actually very exaggerated. That is, Charlie could not have possibly be looking up from this angle because he have to be hovering over the air or at least standing on something. So in the favor of clarity, I decided to have this specific reference photo taken. Okay, starting off with the second strip. What I'm showing you right now is an error that I had when I was making the second strip. That is the way the light is lit in this room. When I was first making the strip, I have lit the room incorrectly, and I only noticed that when I was making the third strip. What exactly was wrong is I was not the same kind of lighting that I would expect from if I was lighting up the same way as if I was lighting the panel 1. So after that, I relit the scene correctly in this image. You might also notice that there's actually a difference between the color of the cupboards in this image and in this image. The cupboards are darker and the tiles are darker as well. And also the cupboards and the counter are both of the same color. This was intentional when I was making the third strip. Just as something that I noticed when I was making this strip is that the caretaker's arms are kind of mixing in with the background and was a bit difficult to differentiate where his arm ends and where the wall begins. I also had changed the color for the cupboards and for the counter, so first of all being both with the same color, because from my logic was that it's better if I made the image much simpler in colors because there is no need for the cupboard to be the different color from the counter. Essentially, both are made out of wood, so I decided to both of these to be the same color of the counter. Now another thing you may notice what I changed is that over here the kitchen tile wall is continuing. In real life, in my real kitchen, there is actually a continuation over here, but I decided to remove it so that it ends over here at this point. This is evident over here. In the original sketch, caretaker's arm was reaching towards the bowl in a different way, but in here I actually changed it to be just as flat so that his elbow is covering his entire arm behind it. Another detail that I added is these two buttons behind the caretaker's head, and I also changed the caretaker's head shape because it was a bit too spherical, and I sliced it down so that it would be consistent with his side head parts. At this point, I have yet to add any kind of shadows, but although you may think that there are shadows over here, they are not actually shadows. They're just a neutral color for the objects. You may notice that as when I finish this scene, that is correcting it in, these two scenes, I have actually kept them unfinished. The reason why is because, as you can see, there is a shadow over here on Charlie. That is when I realized that this shadow is impossible to be because the light is behind Charlie and the shadow would not be lit that way because that would mean that the shadow would be behind the caretaker who's making the shadow. And this made me question this scene too much. So I decided not to continue it. But I will continue. But I did continue it in the future. You may notice that in this strip, the bowl is. You could see that the bowl was actually was as if it was thrown. But later on, I decided that it would be just better as if it just appeared in front of Charlie, much because it added this kind of unnecessary complexity. I also just didn't like that he was through the bowl and somehow did not break.